So to get us started, we'll just have everybody introduce themselves, and your name and class year, where you're currently working, and kind of what you do, and summarizing what you do. I know in your intro videos you talked about, you mentioned the specific areas that you're practicing in, so that would be helpful too. So I guess we'll start with Jim, who is our most senior member of the panel from the class of 91.
The old guy. Thank you, Ms. Conti. Hi, everyone. Nice to talk to you. My name is Jim Garland. I'm a member of the class of 1991, and very glad to talk to all of you tonight. So I am a partner at a law firm in Washington, D.C. called Covington Burling. It's a 100-year-old firm with offices all around the world. It's got about 1,300 lawyers globally, so it's a big firm, one of the largest firms in the country. And my practice is focused on government enforcement investigations and national security related matters, which is a particular brand of criminal defense work and investigations work that is somewhat unique to Washington, D.C. because of the national security and intelligence community agencies that are here in Washington. So I've been a lawyer now for 20 years, and I went to Princeton for undergraduate, and then I worked for a little while between college and law school, and then I went to UVA for law school. Right after law school, I clerked for a judge in Ohio, in Columbus, who actually was a partner before he was a judge at Nick's firm. And then I came to Washington and joined Covington Burling. So happy to talk to you about your interest in a legal career and answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Jim. How about you, Nick?
Hey, nice to talk to everybody. Nick Reis. I graduated in 2001. So getting older, not quite as old as Jim, I guess. I am an attorney, an associate at Vorys in Columbus, which is a kind of mid-sized law firm. We have, I think, about 400 attorneys, most in Columbus, but we have offices all over Ohio, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Akron. We've got offices in DC, Houston, and we just opened an office in Southern California. So getting a little bit outside of that regional footprint. Pittsburgh as well. I'm in the real estate group, so I do all transactional work. A lot of sales and acquisitions of commercial property, commercial leasing, some mortgage finance work, and kind of everything that goes along with or is related to real estate. I've been practicing for 9 years now, and happy to hear questions you guys have, and hopefully I can be helpful.
Great, thanks, Nick. And Liz from the class of 03.
Yep. I graduated from Academy in 2003. I'm currently a partner at Kitrick, Lewis & Harris. We represent plaintiffs in personal injury, medical malpractice cases. I do some consumer class action work, but basically represent mostly physically injured people in torts cases or negligence cases, which not baking torts, but the law kind, which I don't think anybody maybe knows when they go to law school. But you find out. I went to Kenyon College for undergrad, and then I went to Capital Law School here in Columbus. Our law firm is just one office in Columbus. There are 5 attorneys. So a small firm, and we've got 2 attorneys who are of counsel. And they kind of practice in the same area. One lawyer does ethics, but so we pretty much represent injured people at our firm. Happy to answer any questions you have about that or about how I ended up there or anything else.
Perfect. Well, we'll get to some of that too. So it sounds like we've got different size cities represented and different size firms too as well. So that should be some nice stories to hear from you all. So we just talked a little bit about where you got your post-academy degrees, but to maybe add on that, did you feel that academy did a good job preparing you for that academic success and for the education that you've had? And it can be anyone who wants to go can go.
Yeah, absolutely. There's especially in legal practice, but really any career, sort of analytical rigor and careful, thinking and writing are really the coin of the realm. And in law practice, especially, being able to construct logical arguments and to write well, that's just critically important. And academy prepared me so well for that in college and then in law school. And I still, even to this day, remember sort of the writing instructions and guidance that I got from the academy all the way back to Mr. Trowbridge in 7th grade, and and Mr. Izzo in 10th and 11th grade history, and those lessons stay with you. And so the academy is giving you all a great foundation for any career, really, but certainly a career in the law.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It certainly prepares you well for college, and I would say those skills really translate. I mean, even still, when I'm writing something and it doesn't work, I'll think of Mrs. Hogan saying, like, if it's just not working, even if you love this sentence, just throw it out and start over, or, put it over on a different document and start over. It's just not working. So I still kind of hear those things and still edit out all the unnecessary words. So especially with writing, I would say, but the analytical thinking that translates into math and science and all of those things definitely prepare you very well.
Yeah, I've also always felt very prepared after high school, and I often, if you get a question of who's your favorite teacher or most memorable, I can only really think of teachers from high school and really none from college, and maybe occasionally a couple from law school, but really the classes in my time at academy stuck with me more than anything at any level. And I thought in undergrad it seemed not easy, but high school was almost a little more difficult, I think, just because I had a lot more going on. Played sports every season, and taught me very well how to manage my time, and that's huge when you get into law school, because time becomes very precious, and management is a key skill to have.
Jen, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I just caught it. Thank you. I've heard that about Mrs. Hogan in the writing, Liz, and your experience with her. I hear that from so many different people. So our current students, keep that in mind as you're going through English now, that it will pay off in the long run too. So then for our next question, a little bit more about your college experience and what you chose to major in and how that impacted any career choices you had at post-college.
I was I'll go first this time, Jim, I'll spare you. I was actually a science pre-professional major, which translates to pre-med. And I did stick with that and graduate with that degree, but I kind of shifted gears. I ended up not really wanting to go to med school, and moved to DC after undergrad, and worked for the Treasury Department for a few years, and kind of got the bug a little bit. And I'm sure Jim can attest, I think 1 in 10 people in DC is an attorney, and I'm not exaggerating. So that's kind of all around, and I got me thinking about it. And law school is great because there are absolutely no prerequisites other than an undergrad degree. So I didn't have to worry about taking any classes or anything like that. I took the LSAT, and a couple years later, or maybe a year later, went to Ohio State. Moved back to Columbus with my wife, who was then not my wife, but we got married a week before I started school, and here we are 12 years later. But she's from Columbus, which made it a lot easier. But that's kind of how I ended up as an attorney. I didn't really have it on the radar until after I graduated from undergrad.
I can go next, I guess. I majored in classics and ancient Greek language in college, which I didn't go to college thinking I would do, but I just took some classes in it and loved it. So your really options if you major in something like that, unless you want to go back and do prerequisites somewhere else for other professional things, is really go get a master's and maybe a PhD and be a teacher or a professor, something like that, or go to law school, because you're not really going to go to med school without going back and doing a pretty significant amount of stuff for any career in science or engineering or architecture. Any of those things are those aren't the prerequisites that you're taking. But yeah, I thought Academy prepared me really well to major in that kind of stuff. I didn't take Latin at Academy actually, but there were definitely times I wished I had.
Yeah. So I majored in public policy, which was kind of like a political science major at undergrad. But I took classes in all different departments throughout my 4 years in college, including arts and sciences and social sciences, mathematics, all sorts of different courses. And what I think you're hearing from the three of us is that there are a lot of different paths academically to get to law school. And I think the people that are happiest in law practice and who often are drawn to law practice, especially at a law firm, are people who are intellectually curious, who like to try a lot of different things and like just sort of the process of learning a new subject in a new area. And I get to have that experience. I think we probably all get to have that experience every time we take on a new client or a new case, because you have to learn the facts and learn the issues, and it's always new, and there's never one case that's just the same as the other, and that's really fun. So a liberal arts education undergrad, which is kind of what I think you're hearing from all three of us, is a very good way to train to become a lawyer, because you sort of have to learn the traits of logic and analysis and discipline and getting up a learning curve on a new area constantly as a lawyer. And those are traits that you can learn in an undergrad program that's sort of diverse and has a liberal arts background.
Great, thank you. And to kind of wrap up your early start, your early successes, but maybe a little bit about how you got to the role that you're in now and how you might utilize the Academy network, or did you utilize the network in part of your journey?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. So I definitely did. When I was in college, I interned on the Supreme Court of Ohio, and I had a connection to the Chief Justice of Ohio at the time through actually a teacher of mine at Academy, who is now himself a judge. His name is Jeff Sutton. And I think Mrs. Sutton may be a teacher at Academy still, right? Yeah. And their kids have gone through the Academy. So Jeff, Judge Sutton, is what was just out of college when I was in 7th grade. He was a brand new teacher, 22 or 23 years old at Academy. And he was my soccer coach, and he took an interest in me, and he was a great teacher. Also, I had him for class. And so I sort of grew up, sort of getting to know him. And then he went off to law school. He went to Ohio State and set every record in the book, I bet, as a student at Ohio State, and went on to clerk on the Supreme Court of the United States, and became a partner at a firm in Columbus, and then a judge. But when I was in college, he suggested that I intern for the Chief Justice of Ohio between my junior and senior year, which I did, which was really a transformative experience for me. And then again, when I was coming out of law school, he put in a good word for me with another judge in Columbus named Guy Cole, who's the chief judge of the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals, who is the former partner at Nick's firm. And so I was a law clerk to him. And then all along the way, I've kept in touch with my network of friends and classmates and people I've known in different years throughout, at the Academy. One real highlight for me was when I took a a detour from my job at the law firm and worked in the Obama administration and as a senior official in the Justice Department. And when I had that experience, I was able to host Attorney General Eric Holder, who came to Academy and gave a speech to all the students at Academy, and that was a really neat experience too, to be able to bring him back and show him around my old school and to introduce him to CA. And so I've tried to really hang tight to my relationship with the Academy, even though I'm here in Washington, D.C., and have certainly benefited from my CA network along the way.
I've used a lot of connections. I started law school in 2008, and about 2 months later, we had quite a bit of an economic downturn. So a lot of the firms dropped all of their incoming first-year associates, dropped offers to students for summer jobs. And even when I graduated in 2011, it was still pretty bad. But after my first year, it's hard to get, a quality internship after your first year of law school anyhow. But, the economy was so bad that no one was hiring anybody. I got a summer job at a little boutique real estate firm in Columbus called Kephart Fisher. And that was through my buddy from high school, Andrew Dunn, who I played football and basketball with. His father-in-law is the principal attorney there, and he told me that he was looking for an intern. And a couple of days later, I had a job, which was great. And I ended up working there the next summer and part-time during my second and third years, and got a lot of really good experience that is kind of hard to come by until you're out of school and actually working. So I was there for a couple of years after I graduated, and then I had an opportunity to go to Bricker and Eckler, which is another firm in Columbus. That was through a guy named Dusty McCreary, who's an Academy guy, and his kids were about my age at Academy, and we had worked across the table on a couple of deals together. And Dusty called me one weekend and said, "Would you be interested in coming over here to work?" So that was another definitely Academy connection in a number of ways. And then I've been at Vorys for, I think, about 4 years now, but we have a lot of Academy connections, both alumni and parents of students. And the Academy network's very strong at Vorys, and I think it kind of goes both ways. I've even done some legal work for Academy. So, but yeah, especially locally. I mean, Jim even gets the benefit in DC, but if you're in Columbus, it's just such an asset to have. I mean, everybody knows of the school, and a lot of people have family that went there, they went there, their kids go there, or know people that went there, and everyone thinks very highly of it. So the network is strong, and probably worth more than anything else, really. So yeah, a lot of connections.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I mean, I don't know that I've directly gotten hired somewhere because of Academy or anything like that, but certainly there are Academy people all over the place in Columbus, especially. And definitely what Nick said is completely true, that it's thought of very highly. There's lots of people that went there, lots of people whose kids go there, throughout the legal profession in Columbus, regardless of what area of law you practice. People look up your bio before a deposition or something, and all of a sudden you're talking to opposing counsel about Academy. So it's just all over the place. So
I always wonder if I should be embarrassed that I have my high school on my LinkedIn profile, but I leave it up there because it's a great thing to have there, and people see it, and it's it sparks conversation. And you look at a lot of profiles and don't see many high school diplomas on LinkedIn, but keep mine up there, certainly. And to kind of piggyback on Liz, not just other attorneys, but just across all industries. I mean, I get in a lot of transactional work with companies that are, dealing with their real estate needs, and you run into academy affiliates and kind of all different areas of business and law and medicine, everything you can think of.
Yeah, that's completely true. Also, like my clients treating physicians sometimes will be academy grads, more than one. So
that's great. Thank you. And I'm looking at our panel of speakers, and having worked in the alumni office, I can tell you that these three have stayed involved with Academy. So it's not just utilizing the network, but it's also staying involved. And Jim will frequently come to our receptions in DC, and Nick helps with our golf outing, and Liz serves on the alumni board. So I think it's great that you all have kept Academy as a part of your experience, and it's good to show that our current students that staying involved with the school has a lot of benefits for you personally, but professionally as well, and keeps you in touch with folks. So thank you. Switching gears a little bit, what is something that people would be surprised to hear about the work that you do?
Well, I mean, the work that I do, it's definitely legal work, and you need to have training and experience and substantive knowledge to bring to bear on the challenges that my clients are facing. But it's a lot of it is more than that, or different from just sort of having the technical expertise. It's judgment and sort of a practical sense of what is fair and what can work or what won't work. And a lot of times clients, especially clients under enormous pressure, facing government scrutiny, potentially their own personal liberty is at stake even, you end up having to be as much a counselor and a friend. And Liz, I'm sure this is true in your practice too, where you've got people who've been very seriously injured, where the human elements of the job are really important. Sometimes even more important than the intellectual elements of the job. You really need to be able to connect with people, understand human emotions and what drives people, and that's been important to my practice. An example would be not so much on the sort of client side, but on the adversary side, when I had a prosecutor in a very, very significant national security case where we were representing a big company, and the prosecutor kind of had one speed, and we figured out pretty quickly that this guy on the other side, this Justice Department prosecutor, was always going to take the most aggressive, most draconian, severe position, no matter what the issue was, whether it was a little issue or a big issue. And once we kind of had that insight about the way this guy was wired, we realized that was actually a limitation of his, because you could figure out that, well, he's always going to react the same way. You always knew how he was going to react. Always. There was no sort of guessing about him. Any particular situation, you knew how he was going to respond. And that turned into an advantage for us, because we could predict easily what was going to happen if we did one thing or another thing. And we were able to use that to our advantage. And having that kind of emotional intelligence is really important to the job. And I think a lot of brand new lawyers and law students don't actually understand that part of the job can be just as important as the sort of pure substantive learning of being a lawyer.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's probably, I don't know how, I guess it's probably surprising, but that's, the human element is really important. It's almost, you have all of this knowledge or information that you're trying to convey to someone, but how you say it is usually just as important as what you're saying, especially with clients who are under a lot of stress. Like typically as a lawyer, not always, and probably not with what Nick does, but with certainly what Jim and I do, sometimes it's the worst thing that's ever happened to this person. in their entire lives. You know, sometimes it's their whole life is devastated because they're injured. You know, they lost their job. Maybe they're never going to go back. They're permanently disabled physically. And he's talking about people, you know, potentially losing their liberty, losing their business. You know, it's a lot of times you're seeing people on the worst day of their life, and they're looking to you to sometimes wave a magic wand and fix it all. And that's just not possible as a lawyer. And a lot of times you're delivering maybe not bad news, but not news that's going to make people happy often, or isn't really the answer that they want. And you can't give them the answer they want because the answer they want isn't true, unfortunately. So there's a lot of explaining just how the system works, and that, you know, we can't change the system and we're working within the system. And these are the four corners of what's accomplishable. So there's a lot of that, the kind of what package do you put this information in? It's not just the getting the information, but how do you convey it to someone in a way that A, they'll understand it, and B, you're not just being disrespectful, I guess, which is, I think, something that younger lawyers sometimes struggle with, breaking it down into, maybe not younger, but less experienced, breaking it down into understandable and saying it in a tone and in a way that, you know, you're not just cold and they don't feel like their own lawyer's throwing the book at them. So that's definitely a big part of it. For personal injury, I would say the most surprising thing to a lot of people is probably that most plaintiffs aren't getting huge windfalls in lawsuits. It just doesn't happen. The idea that there's all these frivolous lawsuits out there with these gigantic verdicts, specific to my area of practice, that's just not true.
For me, it's, I guess, surprising is maybe not the best word, but I think a lot of people who maybe don't have really any experience with legal work think that everyone's a litigator. And I only do transaction. I've never been in a courtroom to practice law. A couple speeding tickets, but and you know, in the transactional world, you kind of just become part of a deal team, and in most cases the parties are not really adverse. You know, everybody wins when a deal closes for the most part, and there are legal issues that arise, but it's certainly not really the majority of getting a real estate deal done. Most of it is making sure that, you know, when you're drafting the contracts, that the terms that everyone's agreed to are in there, and then just seeing it through. And then it turns into kind of project management, and you're just trying to get the deal done. So a lot of it, there certainly there's legal work involved, and there are legal concepts involved, but most of transactional work is just trying to get a deal done, and obviously making sure that your client's protected, and you know, everything's tied up and there are no loose ends. But it's just kind of working with both your client and your parties, and your the adverse parties. Adverse, I'll use air quotes, because, like I said, a lot of times everyone wants to close, and everyone kind of wins in the end if they get what they want. So it's not the kind of typical thing that you think an attorney does, but that's kind of how the other side of the firm practice. Now the litigators are a totally different world, and I have no idea what they do. I know they're up late a lot, and they're real streaky. We're kind of more consistent. You know, they'll get on a big deal and they'll bill to one client for 6 months, whereas I'll work on 12 different things every day. But yeah, that's most surprising is that you know, I don't go to court. That's ever. Hopefully never.
I just do not understand how a lawyer can practice that way, but maybe you can explain it to Liz and me over a beer or something, Nick. I just don't. Going to court is all the fun.
Well, if I'm in court, that means something really bad happened.
Right.
So most of my work is trying to make sure that everything is papered to a point where you never have to go. There's no question as to anything, as to any of the terms of the deal, so that nothing has to be litigated over. We're on the front end of it.
Yeah.
You guys are on the back end of it.
That's great. I think it's so important to show people who are interested in the field that there are so many different ways that you can practice and to be a lawyer, whether if you want to be in court or not be in court or that sort of thing. So I think it's great that you all have those experiences. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but I heard some of these through some of the answers, but what would you say is the biggest challenge you're facing or have faced in your work? And then, anticipating in the next 5, 10, et cetera, number of years, what is that looking like for you?
I think the biggest challenge right now is just seeing how the courts and how the process is all adjusting to the pandemic. I think is just at this moment, that's probably the biggest challenge because so much of what I do is in person. It's not a ton of in court time, but there is some of that. And certainly, would some cases need to be tried for various reasons, and just how are we going to accomplish that in this kind of, world that we're in. And a lot of it, like we touched on earlier, is that personal element of it. And how is that translating from right now, at least, conveying that personal element and having those difficult conversations with people or, negotiating something or whatever over Zoom or over the phone. And it's just not the same. How is that all going to work? And I think just the question kind of answers it, is the answer to kind of one of the biggest challenges always is anticipating what are the trends in litigation, what are the trends in this type of law, what's the technology looking like for the next 6 months, for the next 5 years, what does the firm look like in 5 years, and what are the legal trends and where's the law headed? So that's kind of the biggest challenge, is really anticipating where we're headed. And not just with the pandemic, but in general. I think that's always the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I agree with all of that for sure. It's hard to think of anything other than responding to the pandemic and answering this question, honestly. I mean, the context for me is that I'm helping to run a firm that's global in nature, and we have about half of our lawyers outside the United States. We have offices, and our biggest offices in Washington. We have offices in New York and San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Los Angeles, but then also in London, Brussels, Frankfurt, Dubai, Johannesburg, Seoul, South Korea, Beijing, and Shanghai. And managing a global business in the best of circumstances, given everything that's going on geopolitically and economically in the world, is hard. But when you have to take all of your people, including all of your lawyers and all of the staff, and move them remote, working from home, sometimes in very difficult quarantine conditions. We had colleagues of mine in Beijing and Shanghai who were forced to live in their little apartments for months, literally without ever leaving during the quarantine period. It becomes just an incredible challenge to provide the service to your clients that they deserve while maintaining any sense of morale and spirit of camaraderie and teamwork across a firm that's global. And so that has been just an enormous challenge, and very proud of how our firm has responded and made it work. And our clients have responded, and they're making it work. But it's very, very hard. I think over the long run, what this period of crisis is going to do to the legal profession, it's really going to be interesting to see. That I think what was so much previously an in-person sport, will much of it will be remote, I think, permanently. People are no longer going to need the big corner office with the fancy furniture and the oil painting of a dog, and everybody's working from their basement, like where I am now, the ping pong table right behind me. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that for lawyers going forward, just like in every other profession. Some things are going to have to happen in court. You're going to have, grand juries and juries and criminal proceedings and civil proceedings in court will always happen. But a lot of the stuff that surrounds those proceedings can be taken online, and I think will continue to be online. And that's going to be a big shift in how we practice. And that seems, I'm kind of sad about that. I don't like the online, work from home dynamic. I think there's something fun about the in-person experience and sort of enriching, but it's hard for me to see going back after this.
Yeah. Obviously the biggest challenge right now is trying to figure this pandemic thing out. We're 7 or 8 months in. So at this point, at least, in our office, we've pretty much got it down to, I think, a very functional level. Our productivity has kind of stayed steady or at I think just below what we were at before, which is good. I mean, everyone thought we were going to experience a pretty significant drop. But there was a lot of work initially. Everyone was trying to figure out what they needed to do. And then I think a little dip once everyone got comfortable with how they operated with pandemic and once all the rules and regulations kind of finally got ironed out with how everyone else had to operate. And now, the bigger challenge is kind of what's going to be the long-term effect of this. Both how we work and what kind of work we get. I mean, I do a lot of work with commercial office spaces, leasing and people buying their own offices, and I have to think that when this all is over, people are going to want less space. Hopefully not a whole lot less. I think it'll change things, but like Jim said, you lose a lot by not being in the office with all of your colleagues, and both from a camaraderie perspective and also just like I pick up a lot of work just walking around the hallways, and when you have an office or a firm that does kind of everything under the sun, I'll run into someone in the corporate group that has a client that's doing an asset acquisition and they've got some real property, and I got to help them out on that. Or that's kind of some of the stuff you lose. And we've done a decent job of using like Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all that to kind of stay in touch and be click away. But there's nothing that can fully replace being in an office and walking around and seeing people and catching up with them, and that's how you get to know them personally and about their families and what's going on in their lives and everything. So we'll see what happens.
Nick, you don't necessarily see that it might be a permanent shift to more virtual, like Jim is feeling like it could?
I think that we will have options to work from, a lot more options to work from home, and a formal policy. Or I think that if someone said, "Hey, I want to work from home every day," I don't think that would be out of the question. A year ago, if someone asked that, I'd get a funny look. But now that everything's like, all the infrastructure's in place, we've got all of our computers and networks and video conferencing, all that set up. So it's not hard to go. And I am not on any kind of a schedule of when I come in and when I stay at home. It's just kind of, if I feel like I need to come in, or if I really need to get something out the door and my kids are home, I got to come to the office. But I think that it's just going to open up a lot more options for how people want to work, and I think you'll have a lot of choices. And it's unique to everybody how you want to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll just open up more options, and people see they can do it remotely. So, I think it's one of those, maybe normally you go into the office every day. But, you know, this Wednesday you want to leave on vacation at 3. So you decide to work from home so that, you know, you are where you need to be in order to leave and you're not risking getting stuck in traffic. Like, I think just, you know, or you've got to get to your kid's soccer game by a certain time and your house is closer to where you want to end up by 5. So I think it just opens that up a lot. And I think if nothing else, it makes it seem way less worth it to sit in a lot of traffic, I think, to a lot of people.
I think a lot of firms and probably workplaces in general would love to have the opportunity to test a system like this, and this just so happened to be forced on them. Like, I mean, having an 8, 9, 12-month period to test something like this, you couldn't do otherwise. This just forced everyone to do it. And I think at least for us, I think we came out a lot better than anyone expected, and I think that everyone's pretty confident that people could continue to do this if they want, or if they want to come in, they can come in.
Thank you. It's great to hear how things have been working for you and what you see moving forward. I have a question from the audience, but actually we'll backtrack a little bit. This person is curious about your experience taking the LSAT, which we didn't touch on too much when we were talking about our getting started period.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the LSAT is the standardized test that you have to take for basically all law schools. Not everyone, but most law schools require you to take the LSAT. And it's kind of like the SAT or ACT for law school. And it, you know, it's what I thought was interesting about the LSAT is it's a practice. It's one of these kinds of tests that if you practice for it, you can actually really improve your performance, because it's there's some tricks to the trade, honestly. And so if you take an LSAT cold without ever having looked at one before, it can be kind of befuddling. But the LSAT itself, once you take a few practice tests or take a review course, it's surmountable for sure. It's not, I wouldn't say it's fun, but it's not the end of the world. The bar exam is a different animal altogether. That is a much less pleasant process than the LSAT. So we can talk about that later maybe, but first things first, the LSAT's definitely doable, in my experience at least.
Yeah, and the nice part about the LSAT is it requires no outside information.
Yes.
So it's if I remember, it's been a while, but the reading comprehension part was very much like the SAT, I think. And then there are logic games that I liked. If you like doing that sort of thing. Now it's all about time. You know, it's a test of time, and if you could have an unlimited time, everyone could probably get a perfect score. But I remember I bought a few books and did them after work for a couple months and then took it. So it's not a huge commitment. Like, you're not studying for a year or anything like that. The bar exam's another story. Like Jim said.
Yeah, it's not really, it's not an information test. It's like a skill test. So if you practice the skill, you can definitely improve your score.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about the bar as well and what that process was like. And is it, what as bad as it seems when you're an outsider looking at it?
Well, I'm guessing all three of us took the Ohio bar exam, right? So at least when I took it back in the days of horse-drawn buggies, it was a 3-day exam, and one of the days is sort of a standardized test where you sort of fill in the bubbles like the SAT, and it's every state administers that part of the bar exam. But then the Ohio specific parts of the bar exam were essays, and it was a marathon. You got an hour, I think it was something like 12 or 18 essays, an hour each, or spread over 3 days, plus this multiple choice component that I mentioned, across tons of different subject areas of the law. Before you take the tests. They tell you what general subjects will be covered. So procedure and criminal law and corporations and tax or whatever, whatnot. But they don't tell you at all what the specific questions are. That's sort of, you have to study everything. Kind of like the LSAT, there is a method to it. If you sort of learn what they're looking for and how to like anticipate what the graders are seeking, you can write the essays just sort of to the way they grade the exam. But that requires an enormous amount of studying. I studied for the bar exam basically from the day I graduated from law school in mid-May all the way up until the date of the exam in late July, and really intensely as the exam date approached, and it was tough. And you feel incredibly relieved when you get the good news that you've passed. That's a good day when you get your bar exam result back from the Ohio bar.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Nick.
Same deal. I mean, I don't know if do you take it at Vets Memorial, Jim?
Yeah.
And this is the old Vets Memorial, not the new, like really nice looking building.
No, it was not nice. I don't know what the new one looks like, but the one I took it in was like a concrete cavern.
Yeah, it looks like a very enlarged, like common area in a prison, basically.
Yes.
And there's a big red digital clock on the wall and a proctor, and it's just like you're at a table with one other person, and it's a marathon and a sprint. But yeah, one day multiple choice. We had, when I took it, the other 2 days were one was half essays and one was like you got a case file and got questions on it.
Yeah, that might have been like the half day portion was the case.
Yeah, but you still wrote essays on it.
Yeah.
But you had a case file to kind of analyze. But then the rest of it was all just substantive essay questions that you had to have knowledge of. And it is, again, like the worst part about the timing of it is you graduate from law school and you like get through this 3-year run, and then you have to start studying really harder than you did in the last 3 years. And you have to study subjects that the majority of, or maybe 90% of, you're never going to work on, and you have no interest in. But at this point, I think it's kind of a rite of passage more than judging your knowledge of the law. I'm glad it's over with, and I feel really bad for the kids that are taking it right now. I think they might have just taken it, but it got delayed, and they have to deal with all kinds of different circumstances and probably a bunch of different smaller rooms. And I have no idea what they ended up doing, but just having it drag would be worse than taking it, because you're preparing for this date certain, and now I think that they keep moving it. They kept moving it for a lot of people in a lot of different states. So it's everything you hear about, it's true.
Ohio's bar exam is tough too. There are other states that aren't as tough. Like the joke about Massachusetts was they should call it Passachusetts because everybody passes in Massachusetts. So if you're shopping around for different jurisdictions, go to Massachusetts.
I think Ohio just adopted the uniform bar exam too. I took it in 2010, so it was like the same format that Nick took for sure, with the case file thing and all that. But that allows you to transfer at least that portion of the bar exam if you get a certain grade to, I think, all the states that have adopted the uniform bar exam, which I'm not sure what it is, but each state usually has their own kind of portion, and that's usually like the essay part that's specific to that state's law. I'm not exactly sure how the uniform bar exam works, but I know the intent of it is that you could take the bar exam or go to law school in one place, and then it makes you kind of more mobile to different jurisdictions or different states, I guess, rather than saying jurisdiction. But so yeah, it's not fun, but it's doable. It's manageable. Academy, if you're getting decent grades at Academy, you know how to study, and it's just a bunch of studying. So, make a schedule and stick to it.
And I thought very important on the day of or the days of was just like staying calm.
Mm-hmm.
The couple of classmates that I had that the week before I'd seen in the library and they were just losing it, thinking they were going to fail. Those are the ones that failed. I mean, if you're confident and just stay calm, in all likelihood, you're going to pass.
And if you do study, it's, and
part.
you can't know everything. So that's kind of why the schedule is really important, because it's okay. I'm not 100% on this subject, but I got to move on because I can't show up to the bar exam only knowing property because I studied property for 3 months trying to learn everything. So it's just, get what you can and move on because you've got to cover all of it. I mean, they, like Jim said, they do. You do have kind of an idea of what's tested more often than not, and there's certainly a skill to taking that test as well. But law schools have gotten better and better, even since I graduated, I think, at helping students prepare for the bar exam. So some of those skills, take advantage of that. If in law school it's available, take advantage of the bar prep class, take a bar prep class, because there is a skill to the test itself.
Thank you. I think that's so helpful to hear kind of the insider perspective on both of those testing experiences. Because again, me looking from the outside, it seems really scary. So I can imagine for students thinking that they might want to do this as a career, that would be really intimidating. So your experiences are really helpful. For our last question, I would just like to say, to ask if you had to give your younger self some advice, what would you, particularly about your career or anything in general, but what advice would you give your younger self?
That's a tough one, Jen.
I'll go first. I guess I think I've followed my own advice here mostly. I'll say this: I've been the happiest when, in my career and really just in life, when I've pursued things that are interesting and rewarding to me personally, and that I love and am passionate about, and not fixated on what is necessarily the next rung in the ladder, or what I thought was sort of the next step in this sort of chain of achievement, but rather following what I was really driven by. And in a long career in the law, your path can take a lot of different twists and turns. And I think being willing to take risks and to follow the path where your career takes you, and not necessarily do what's the most safe or careful or customary step, I think is important. And for me, when I've taken those risks in my career, they've led to really wonderful experiences that have transformed my career in many respects. So to take one example, when I was a mid-level associate at my firm, I was working on a lot of corporate cases, and I had the opportunity to take on a pro bono case, which means a case where you represent the client for free. It's always a client that's too poor to pay for legal services. And this was a guy who had been convicted of murder for a murder he didn't commit, and he was serving a life sentence in prison in West Virginia. And he somehow made his way to our firm through the mail and asked if somebody would help try to get him a new trial and get him out of prison. And I didn't know this guy, and but I was interested in the case. I thought the facts were interesting, and I was really busy on my other work that was sort of more traditional paying work that clients were paying me a lot of money to do. But I decided to stretch and take on this pro bono case in sort of my nights and weekends time, and it turned into one of the most fulfilling moments of my entire career. And I was able to see the case all the way up to the Supreme Court and got the guy a new trial, and he's now free and went to college and is married, has a little baby, and just knowing that I was able to use my skills to help somebody like that. And that I really came close to not doing it because I was too busy and thought it might be sort of not the best for my career progression at the firm to devote so much time to this pro bono case. It's crazy to think that way, but because I did that, I got exposed to other people and was able to get great opportunities in other matters and in the government. And so it's obviously helped his life a lot. And so I guess I would encourage you to take risks, even when you think it's not the most safe play, to follow your dreams and to take risks in your career.
It's tough to follow up on that. You've freed a guy for president, or tough to follow.
You can talk about a real estate transaction that freed a guy from maybe the deal for the real estate or the prison. I don't know.
Yeah. I would say, don't worry if you don't know exactly what you want to do when you're in high school. You guys that are on this call, you certainly probably shouldn't know what you want to do right now. Or if you don't, it's not a big deal. And if you don't when you're in college, not a big deal. And really, if you don't know what you want to do in law school, not a big deal. I mean, everything kind of works its way out, and just stick with it. And I think, if you work hard and kind of keep your options open, you'll find something you like to do. And there are a lot of opportunities out there, but don't ever feel like you should know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 18 years old. That's all I got.
I would definitely say that knowing what kind of motivates you, like why are you doing what you're doing and why do you care about it? Because that can translate into so many different things. I went to law school because I thought I wanted to do criminal defense and work to end the death penalty. And the kind of motivation behind that is that I really like to help people who are up against bigger forces for whatever reason, like the individual who's faced with, a bigger force on the other side, whether that's the government or, it's an insurance company or a large corporation or something like that on the other side. So it translates really well into what I'm doing. And I don't even know that I was really aware of that even when I arrived doing personal injury. But I went to a CLE with a national organization, and it was immediately like, these people are speaking my language. Like, this is what I care about. This is why I'm here. So I think whatever that is for you, if you're passionate about the environment or whatever it might be, or you love working on a team to represent a big company, and that's what really motivates you, and you love being part of a team. There's a million different ways to go about it. There's so many different things to do as a lawyer, but also, like the other two panelists have said, not being afraid to change paths, and not being too stuck on, well, I'm doing this and I'm on this path, so I can never change it. I heard someone else say on a panel one time, do the job that you have to the best of your abilities, even if it's not the job you want. You do what you're doing the best you can, and the other opportunities will follow, and be proactive about seeking out what that is. But I think knowing the why is really important, because it's kind of the starting point for, what is it that I eventually want to do? Well, why do I want to do that? What do I care about? And also just the practical side of it too. What type of lifestyle do you like? Do you like a steady, I don't know if any law job has ever been 9 to 5, but do you like kind of a steady workflow, or are you okay with the boom and bust? Do you want to get a paycheck, or are you okay with boom and bust on that side too? So just being aware of yourself, I guess, is the starting point for all of it. But there's no reason that, you would think, don't be upset if you're not, 18, knowing what you want to do when you're 50, because I certainly did. And I don't know that anybody can really anticipate all the twists and turns on that road. Maybe some people do and can.
Well, I think that was an excellent note to end on. I think your advice is something that I hear across disciplines and across fields, and just being open to opportunities, and wanting to learn more in whatever way that might look is very valuable. So I appreciate your advice, and ending on that note. So to wrap up, I just wanted to say thank you to all the students who took the time to listen to our panelists tonight. And I especially want to thank our panelists, Jim, Nick, and Liz, for joining us and taking time out of their day. And now hopefully Nick can go home and y'all can stop working for the day. So thank you so much to everybody for joining us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you next time.